Good afternoon. Obviously, the key announcement the country is waiting for yesterday was the change in alert levels. We can't understand why the South Island didn't move down to level 2 sooner. There have been no COVID cases there, and those that have been in close contact of a case had been tested. And while the move down to level 2 would have usually been welcomed, businesses are finding the new level 2.5 or Delta level 2 rules difficult to navigate. Once again, the government has had time to plan for a COVID Delta outbreak, for what a new level 2 would look like, so it could give clear instructions to businesses. And once again, it has failed to do that. National MPs have been contacted overnight by businesses in their communities who are really worried that the new rules will make it even harder to stay afloat. Businesses have felt blindsided by the new venue rules. There has also been 20 days of press conferences from the Prime Minister, but none of the new rules had been signalled. For those businesses in the South Island, it's a particularly bitter pill to swallow. They've been lumped in with the rest of the country, despite having no COVID cases for well more than 300 days. The government has had 18 months to work out how to hold a regional lockdown and keep the economy moving as much as possible, and it's failed to do that. We only have to look at the debacle around testing at the Auckland border as an example. The government has said essential workers crossing the Auckland boundary while the city is at level 4 will need to be tested weekly. The decision to test truck drivers crossing the border came as a huge surprise to the transport sector, who say that they hadn't been consulted on any changes. Now, trucking companies are trying to organise for their drivers to get tested so that they can go through the border. In one case, the company just got told that they can't send them to the pop-up centres to get tested because they're not symptomatic, so they will be turned away. It's looking as though this particular company will have to give their employees a day off each week to go and get tests. The government's effective ban on rapid antigen testing has never made any sense to us. But it's particularly frustrating now that there are new testing requirements for essential workers crossing the Auckland border. The rapid antigen tests deliver results in as little as 15 minutes. If we continue with the status quo, the results of a test will take 24 to 48 hours, and in that time, an essential worker could have moved up and down the country. It's also imposing even more costs on hard-working businesses trying to keep the economy moving. So the government has had 18 months to prepare for this situation. It's had 5 months to work out a plan to deal with the changes that COVID Delta would bring. It hasn't used that time wisely. It's become complacent, and Kiwis are now paying the price for that. Happy to take any questions.
Do you think the Prime Minister's done enough to ensure that we have good supply of vaccines in the country to keep up with demand?
Well, I think we're hearing, last week I heard from the Prime Minister in Parliament that the vaccines were here, we had the vaccines, and it now turns out that apparently we've got some vaccines being contracted for other countries to supply them. So that wasn't really straight up with Kiwis about what we have. The main thing is to get the vaccines into people's arms as fast as possible and to make sure that we order the boosters.
What do you think the problem was? How did we find ourselves in that situation in the first place?
Well, I think the whole rollout was so slow to start with that they ordered what they thought they'd be able to actually get in people's arms. And the problem is that with the lockdown, people got the message and they were able to go and get vaccinated, that they should get vaccinated. So they've been caught unawares again, but surprised.
So the government
Jessica?
wasn't ambitious enough, or it didn't lobby enough, or was it?
Well, I think that the whole plan around vaccination was missing in action when it came to using our primary care providers like general practitioners, family doctors, nurses in the community, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, all of whom should have been the first ports of call. And instead of setting up whole new systems, they could have actually used those and got those vaccines out faster. And it's a really good way of dealing with any vaccine hesitancy is to have people that you know and trust as your medical providers giving you the advice rather than someone coming up on TV that you don't know.
The argument with rapid antigen testing has always been that level of accuracy. Does that not concern you? You use the argument of in 24, 48 hours someone could drive up and down the country. If they had an inaccurate test, that could be the same risk.
Chris, do you want to answer that one? We're in the same boat.
Okay.
You may note that Professor Sean Hendy, who's the government's own expert modeller, has come out and said that rapid antigen tests should be rolled out as a matter of urgency, precisely for the reason that, although they are slightly less accurate, they produce results very, very quickly. And the whole point with Delta is that it moves so quickly, and we need to test as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And of course, with rapid antigen testing, you can do that within 15 minutes. At the moment, what we're going to have is essential workers who are being told that they have to cross the border into Auckland, into the level 4 environment. They've been told they have to get tested weekly, which will be either a nasal PCR test or potentially, depending on what actually happens, a saliva test. Both of those results will take quite some time to firstly happen, but then also be processed. So you may have essential workers out in the community for 5 to 6 days before they are tested. With a rapid antigen test, someone could be tested almost every day, potentially, get the results within 15 minutes. Obviously, you then use the nasal PCR test as a backup to confirm whether or not they've got COVID, and we obviously hope that doesn't happen. And that's why you're seeing supermarkets like Countdown, for example, express real interest in using rapid antigen testing. The absurd situation we have at the moment is that they are banned in New Zealand. There are no rapid antigen tests that have been confirmed or permitted by the Ministry by legislative fiat, or essentially a public health order pursuant to the COVID-19 Public Health Act. There are no rapid antigen tests, and New Zealanders look overseas and they talk to their friends and family in the United Kingdom, where these tests are widely available from pharmacies. They are sent to people's homes. People regularly take them on a daily basis in the UK and lots of other countries. They're required for admission to restaurants, cinemas, rock concerts, for example. You have to show evidence of a negative test, and the NHS says that they're actually just as accurate as a PCR test. Now, there are some scientists who would disagree with that, but regardless, they are very accurate, not quite as accurate probably as a PCR test, but of course it's the rapidity and the speed that is the great advantage we're going with here. We are miles behind the rest of the world when it comes to the use of rapid antigen testing, and we're saying today that we need to make much more use of rapid antigen testing, and you're now seeing experts like Professor Sean Hendy agree.
With the border testing that you were talking about earlier and the concerns with the transport sector, is it the way that it's been handled that is the problem? Because wouldn't an easy solution, they already do drug testing for alcohol, for example, and drug and alcohol content for their drivers. Couldn't you just add in, isn't it just a process of communicating that's been a problem?
Well, the thing is the drug and alcohol testing, well, certainly the police would normally undertake that, and obviously the drivers, but a lot of the companies do it anyway, but the drivers are always subject to being stopped by police and tested, certainly for alcohol. But the rapid antigen test would enable that to be done straight away while they're being stopped. I mean, that's the point. Otherwise, when they can't even, they have to take a whole day off work to go and get a test and wait for the results. You want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I talked to a trucking company this morning who contacted me and said they've contacted the government who and the various officials who basically have no idea yet how it's going to work. So the Prime Minister stands up yesterday at the 1 p.m. and says, or 4 p.m. and says, hey, we're going to have this new rule for Auckland with the rest of the country in relation to testing. That's the first anyone had heard about it. Then when the trucking companies and the companies involved contact the officials, they don't know. There's been a bit of back and forth this morning where the company that I was talking to said, asked the government and asked the officials, and they said, well, if your truck drivers turn up to a pop-up testing station to get the nasal PCR test, they won't be tested because they won't be symptomatic. And of course the whole point is we want people crossing the border in and out of Auckland to be tested even if they're not symptomatic. So there's really a communication breakdown going on there. So it's really unclear how this is all going to work. It's absolutely critical for the lifeblood of the Auckland economy and the wider New Zealand economy in terms of supply chain that there is very clear plans as to how it's going to work. And at the moment, you'd have to say that's not the case. And then you add on top of that the testing difficulties in relation to the timing delays. It's looking like a bit of a mess, frankly.
Isn't it exactly the same as we're testing border workers? It's just working exactly the same way?
Well, say that again.
Isn't it exactly the same as the border workers getting tested every week, the Air New Zealand staff getting tested every week, the port workers getting tested every week, the MIQ workers getting tested every week? What's the difference?
So the major problem with essential workers going in and out of the border is obviously the mobility and the fact that they're travelling constantly in and around the place. So I think that is a major... Well, border workers are essentially going to and from the MIQ facility where they work, for example, or Auckland Airport, for example. I take your point that there's not massive differences, but we should be rolling out rapid antigen testing and saliva testing more generally at our border and for our essential workers as well. And it's been our position for a long time. Well, that's the piece of feedback that I received this morning from a company. There's no doubt that it will take more time than a rapid antigen test is the overall point.
Ms Collins, could you give us a little bit of insight as to what your plans are for next week? It's a recess week. Are you staying here in Wellington? Oh, just at the microphone. Sorry.
Right. Well, if the government had been able to get a handle on the COVID Delta outbreak in Auckland, and we were looking at very similar levels, I would be thinking about whether or not I could travel back. But given that they still have Auckland in level 4, I think the sound thing for me to do is to stay here.
What about your any of them?
No, I think I'm the only one from Auckland here.
Yeah, and you've indicated today that for the rest of the week there's only going to be 7 of your MPs.
That's right.
Yeah, could you tell us why you think that's important?
Oh, well, it's only because the Speaker has come out today and said he's going to be following the same rules as he did last week, so there's not a lot of point people coming in here if there's enough of us here to cover it.
Do you think that he's going too far with these rules, or do you think that...
Hey, the Speaker, I'm fortunate not to be responsible for Trevor Mallard. Thank you, Ben.
In National's plan to supercharge the vaccine a couple of weeks ago.
Sorry?
In National's plan to supercharge the vaccine rollout a couple of weeks ago, there's no priority given to Māori as a group above the population. Given falling vaccination rates, do you believe they need to be prioritised? If so, what ideas would you have about
Look, the National Party just believes in whatever works, basically. So if someone is Māori, if they're Pacifica, if they're Chinese, if they're Pākehā, and they get COVID, that is a danger to everybody. So if everybody can get vaccinated, then that will help everybody else in the country. So we're not obsessed with who's getting preference today, but we do believe, or by any particular organisation, but we do believe that we need everybody who can be vaccinated who wants to be vaccinated to get vaccinated.
They're just on the roll. Māori are falling behind. They are lower than the rest of the population, and it's getting worse.
Yeah,
so do they need to be prioritised?
Well, we've said very clearly, Chris and I both said this, that we don't see any problem in just getting people vaccinated. So whether it's in a kura in Northland, I think there's 3 kura there who were giving vouchers out, grocery vouchers out, $25 to everybody who turned up to get vaccinated. Well, just do it, because the cost to the country and the cost in health and the cost of the economy is so large that we simply can't go around saying, oh, well, we can't do whatever it is it takes. Just get it done. And I think that given that some of the first efforts around vaccinations were to marae, they seem to do a very good job. Just whatever works. Oh, well, we didn't think it was. Look, he has to answer for himself. It wasn't something we wanted to engage on.
Do you think it was wrong to do that?
Well, I just look, again, he's not actually for us to answer for. He needs to answer for himself, not for us.
The Prime Minister called it wrong. Did you say it was wrong?
Well, look, he makes his own decisions, and he has to answer for his own decisions. Joe, you had a question? No. Okay, all right. Okay.
What are the tangible repercussions of a dwindling vaccine supply? What are the public health risks that the government's exposed the public to?
Well, we hope that the government really does have these new vaccine supplies coming in and that they've got enough for when those ones are completed, and that they have the boosters ordered, because so far we've seen nothing around boosters being ordered, and I think as at today, Chris, there's nothing done on that. We can't just wait at the end of the queue hoping for someone to come and help us out. We need to actually be a bit better than that, a bit more proactive. And I think what we're seeing is, it doesn't matter what excuses there are, if people aren't vaccinated, or you make it too hard for people to be vaccinated, then we're not going to be able to get to any sort of target that means that these big lockdowns can be avoided.
Do you think that even this question mark over whether we can get the vaccine supply is damaging for people?
It doesn't help to have any questions about whether or not the supply is, or let's say, it doesn't help the country or people want to get vaccinated to think that the supply is not assured. So it is really important that when the government stands up and says, as they have been, that they have the supply, that they really do have the supply. Just tell us the truth. We're not children. Tell us the truth, and we'll work with it.
Just on what you were saying yesterday in a...
Was it there?
Could it put people off from booking the vaccine?
Well, I hope not, but I do think that sometimes people do get a bit nervous about vaccinations. So if they've got in their mind to go and get vaccinated, that's exactly when they should get vaccinated, right then and there. And that's why it's really important that people can see some purpose in it, such as, can we avoid these great big lockdowns? Can we avoid people having to miss their family funerals? Can we avoid people having to reschedule weddings? Can we avoid all these things? And if everybody plays their part and the government plays its part, which is to get the vaccines in and then get them out to as many places as we can, that's a really good thing.
Just on your release yesterday around Cabinet and what it could have done and, with the terrorists in terms of deportation, you say that there was some sort of, not a loophole, but a way the Cabinet could have deported?
Well, we looked at the Immigration Act yesterday, but also looked at the UN Convention on Refugees, and what was really clear is that there is an opportunity to deport someone even if they have been declared a refugee and therefore a protected person. So I'm going to be asking the government to front up with their legal advice on that, because I'm just not sure if they've got the right advice around what actually constitutes a national security threat, because there is this ability to deport if there's a national security threat. So there's going to be, I mean, it's a legal argument that those of us who are lawyers look at and say, how can we make this better? And what I'm assuring the government is that I won't play the silly games with them that they played with us when we were in government trying to bring about changes to search and surveillance, anything we did around the GCSB, because we think this is a matter of national security and New Zealanders expect us to all play our part.
So it all hinges around that question about national security. Do you think this individual was a threat to national security? Obviously, what you're saying is the government saying no, but you're saying you said yes.
Well, they may have had legal advice that this had been untested, so I just really want to find out what is the issue, and if that is the issue, then perhaps what we need to do is to have some definitions around that to make it clearer that this can be done, because this individual was not the only person of considerable interest to our security agencies, and we need to be very aware that this is not simply, yes, he's a lone wolf in this particular case, but he is unlikely to be the only one that we're very interested in.
You have the government, or you have the GCSB shadow portfolio?
No.
You're on the select
Yeah.
though, right?
Yes, I have national security. Jerry Brownlee has GCSB, and he's yeah.
Were you aware of this individual?
Yeah, I was told in a briefing by the agencies, I think it was a matter of weeks ago. Weeks ago, yep. It might have been about then. We don't take notes, it's all very secret, obviously. Well, the advice, we don't refer to that, but I'm certainly aware of an individual who is under surveillance.
Do you think what David Fair will do yesterday was race-baiting?
Oh, I think he has to answer for himself. I think people can see. They'll make their own judgments on this. Look, I'm just focused on, does it work? And if the Waiparere Trust, which is a provider of whānau ora services, wants to do anything to get more people vaccinated, well, I'm fine with that. It's just, you do what you have to do to get people vaccinated. So I'm not going to climb into David Seymour. It's his actions. He needs to answer for himself. Yeah, Claire.
I'll just give you one more chance to climb into one.
No.
Do you think it's justified for a person who got a priority vaccine himself by virtue of being a politician to then take objection?
I must say, I think he got his vaccination before I did. I didn't get any priority. So what's that? I don't know. Look, let him. Look, he has to answer for his own actions. I'm not his mother, and I'm not his party leader. He should talk to his party leader about that.
You possibly have to work with him if you were able to form a government after the next election. So to Claire's point, do you think that there is an element of hypocrisy?
Well, he'll answer to that himself with people. Look, I'm not going to go down that path. It's simply not something we're here to focus on the things that really matter to New Zealanders, like can they get a vaccination, when can they do it, can they actually keep their business going, can they pay their bills. I'm not worrying about that.
Your first point about when you get a vaccination, David Seymour was sabotaging some people being able to get their vaccination yesterday.
Well, let him answer for that. Thank you.